The Hungry Queen, the Galactic Embassy station hung above the blue curve of a distant world, shining like a floating city in the endless dark. Inside its silver halls, thousands of beings from every known race gathered to talk, trade, and pretend they understood peace. Among them walked Captain Ryan Hale, a young human officer who never thought lunch could change the fate of a galaxy. Ryan's duty was simple. He worked as a food logistics officer, making sure every species received meals that matched their biology. Humans were newcomers in the galactic community, barely respected, but known for their strange courage and curiosity. Ryan liked to believe kindness was stronger than fear. That morning, the air in the main hall shimmered with tension. The Queen of Giran, ruler of one of the oldest empires, had arrived for a diplomatic summit. Her body glowed faintly like polished silver, eyes reflecting stars. She was said to be proud, dangerous, and impossible to approach. Her guards stood motionless around her, their armor alive with energy. No one dared come near. The tables were filled with food from 100 worlds, steaming and glowing in every color imaginable. The scent of spice, oil, and plasma fruit mixed in the air. But the queen sat alone at the far end, her plate untouched. She stared at the dishes before her like a statue carved from moonlight. Ryan noticed her isolation while checking supply lists on his tablet. Everyone else was laughing or negotiating, but she remained silent. A diplomat whispered that Zirans only ate with equals, and since no one was worthy, she would rather starve. Ryan frowned. It didn't feel right. Humans had a saying, "No one eats alone if we can help it." He looked down at his tray, a simple meal of bread, roasted vegetables, and coffee, nothing special. Just earth food. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding, and began walking toward the queen's table. The hall went silent, every step echoed like thunder. Alien eyes followed him, guards shifted. Hands ready on their weapons, someone hissed, "Human!" "Stop," but Ryan kept walking. He stopped beside the queen, bowed slightly, and spoke softly. "Your Majesty, you look hungry. Would you like to share a meal with me?" The guards reacted instantly, weapons hummed. The queen raised her hand and they froze. Her voice was calm but cold. "Do you know what you ask, human?" Ryan smiled nervously. "Only to share some bread? It's what humans do when they see someone lonely." The queen's eyes narrowed. No one had ever dared to call her lonely. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she reached out one silver-clawed hand and touched the bread. The hall gasped. She broke off a small piece, examined it, and brought it to her lips. The texture was strange to her species, but as she chewed, her expression changed. Her pupils widened, and a soft glow passed through the scales of her face. She turned her gaze back to Ryan. "It is warm," she whispered. "It tastes alive." Ryan nodded. "It's from wheat grown under sunlight. Maybe that's why." The queen studied him like he was something entirely new. "No one has ever offered me their food," she said quietly. "In our culture, to share a meal is to share trust. Are all humans this foolish or this brave?" "Maybe both," Ryan replied with a small grin. She tilted her head, something close to amusement flickering in her eyes. Around them, the silence was heavy. The other ambassadors stared as if they had witnessed the breaking of a sacred rule. Then, unexpectedly, the queen gestured to the chair beside her. "Sit, human captain," she said. "If you are brave enough to offer your meal, then you will eat with me." Ryan hesitated only for a heartbeat, then sat beside her. They shared the simple food, bite after bite. While the galaxy watched in disbelief, whispers spread across the station. The Queen of Giran had accepted food from a human. The guards lowered their weapons, but their eyes burned with confusion. No one knew what this meant for the ancient laws of her people. As they ate, the queen asked about Earth. About oceans, rain, and fire, Ryan spoke gently, describing blue skies and the smell of bread in the morning. She listened with the curiosity of a child and the grace of a ruler. By the time the meal ended, a strange stillness filled the hall. Something invisible had changed, a spark of understanding that no treaty had ever achieved. The queen rose and said, "From this day, no Ziran shall dine without remembering the warmth of humanity." Ryan blinked, unsure if he had just made peace or broken an empire's tradition. Later that night, messages flooded across the galactic net. The alien queen ate human food. The queen shared her meal with a man from Earth. The queen smiled. And somewhere in the quiet of her royal chamber, the queen touched a single crumb of bread she had kept from the meal. Holding it like a memory, for the first time in decades, She whispered, not a command but a name. Ryan. The galaxy had no idea that this single act of kindness was only the beginning of something far greater. Something that would soon make every world ask the same question. What is it about humans that even a queen cannot resist? The queen's curiosity days turned into quiet whispers across the Galactic Embassy station. Everywhere Ryan Hale walked, alien eyes followed him with wonder and fear. The human who had shared food with the queen had become a legend overnight. News channels replayed the footage of that strange lunch. Some called it a cultural miracle, others a dangerous breach of protocol, but for Ryan, it was just a meal shared between two beings who were lonely in their own ways. A week later, an encrypted message arrived at the Earth Embassy. The sender's crest glowed with silver light, the royal seal of Zirin Prime. The message contained only one line. Written in the Queen's voice, "The taste of warmth haunts me. Bring the human who gave it." Ryan thought it was a mistake, his commander didn't. Within hours, he was escorted to a diplomatic shuttle bound for Zirin Prime. The flight took 3 days through shifting worm gates and burning star lanes. He spent those days staring at the stars, wondering why a queen of thousands of worlds wanted to see a man with a lunch tray. When he stepped out of the shuttle, the sight of Zirin took his breath away. The planet shimmered like a jewel, oceans of silver mist reflecting crimson skies. Towering spires of living crystal pierced the clouds, and glowing rivers ran through them like veins of light. The air tasted sweet, like static and flowers mixed together. The Queen's palace floated above a lake of mirrored glass, surrounded by silent guards. Ryan was led inside through halls that sang softly when he walked. The walls themselves reacted to sound, echoing faint harmonies that felt alive. At the center of a vast chamber, the Queen waited on a throne made of crystal and starlight. Her eyes found him instantly. The glow around her seemed softer now, more human in its warmth. "Captain Hale," she said, her voice echoing like silver bells. "You came," Ryan bowed slightly. "Your Majesty asked." "I couldn't refuse." She gestured toward a smaller table beside the throne. "Sit, human. Tell me of your world again. And of this thing you call taste," he sat. And the attendants placed strange foods before them. Gelatin suns, plasma fruit, and glowing spheres that floated above the plates. Ryan smiled and pulled from his pack a sealed metal box. Inside were human dishes, bread, chocolate, and a small flask of coffee. The Queen watched with fascination as he poured the drink into a transparent cup. Steam rose in elegant curls. "What is that scent?" she asked, leaning closer. "Coffee," Ryan said. "It wakes humans up when their minds are tired." She took a cautious sip, her silver lips touching the edge of the cup. A quiet hum escaped her throat. Her scales shimmered faintly gold. "It burns, but it comforts," she whispered, "like lightning made gentle." Ryan laughed softly. "That's a perfect description." For hours they talked. About food, about emotions, about why humans sit together to eat even with strangers. The Queen listened with childlike wonder. Her court stood in silence, unsure whether to be horrified or amazed. At one point she asked, "When your people share a meal, does it mean you trust one another?" "Yes," Ryan answered. "Because when you share food, you lower your guard. You can't fight and eat at the same time. So sharing means peace." The Queen fell silent, turning that thought over in her mind. "Then perhaps that is why our galaxy knows endless war," she said slowly. "We stopped eating together long ago." The next day she commanded her chefs to prepare human recipes. The royal kitchens filled with strange smells, butter, garlic, fried vegetables. The Zirin cooks were horrified at first, then fascinated. The Queen herself learned to knead dough with her hands, her claws glinting as she pressed the soft bread. When the first loaf came out, she broke it in half and handed it to Ryan. "Now it is my turn to offer," she said. Her voice trembled slightly. It was the first time anyone had seen her humble herself before another being. Ryan accepted the bread, smiling. "Thank you, Your Majesty." For a moment the hall seemed to pause, even the air felt still. The Queen's people watched their ruler share food with an alien, and in that moment something shifted deep within their hearts. Later that evening, the Queen dismissed her attendants and walked with Ryan through the glowing gardens. Bioluminescent plants swayed in a rhythm that matched the stars above. "Human," she said softly, "do you realize what you've done?" Ryan shook his head. "No, ma'am." "You have made the galaxy talk," she said. "They whisper that I have fallen under your spell. They say a human's food changed my mind. Perhaps they are right. He looked at her, confused. Why me? She smiled faintly. Because you saw hunger and gave warmth instead of fear. In my world, that is rare. The next morning, a decree spread through the Xeran Empire. From that day forward, no diplomatic feast would begin unless a human meal was served first. Across the galaxy, diplomats argued, empires protested, but deep within the Queen's palace, she sat quietly with a single human officer, sharing breakfast in silence. Her eyes glowed softly as she watched him pour her another cup of coffee. And though she spoke no words, every heartbeat of hers whispered the same thought. I will not dine without a human again. The gift of trust weeks passed on Xeran Prime, and Captain Ryan Hale slowly became part of a world that once feared even the sound of his name. Every morning, the palace cooks waited for his arrival, eager to see what strange human food he would show them next, and every evening, the Queen of Xeran herself refused to eat until he joined her table. The galaxy watched in disbelief. Entire news networks dedicated hours to discussing the human who dined with a queen. Some called it diplomacy, others called it manipulation, but the truth was far simpler. Ryan had given her something she hadn't known in centuries: trust. One evening, as twin moons rose over the shining lake beneath the palace, the queen dismissed her guards and invited Ryan to dine alone with her in the royal garden. The air shimmered with the scent of new blossoms, and the table was set with both Xeran crystal dishes and simple metal plates brought from Earth. I asked my chefs to make something different, she said softly. They say this is how humans eat when they celebrate victory. Ryan smiled as he saw the food: roasted vegetables glazed with honey, bread baked golden, and a small cup of sweet wine. You've learned fast, Your Majesty, he said. Her silver lips curved in a faint smile. I learned from good teachers. They began to eat. Slowly, in silence at first, the queen watched him closely. Every gesture, every breath, as if she were memorizing what being human felt like. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than the wind. Do humans ever fear betrayal when they share food? Ryan looked at her, surprised. Sometimes, yes, but that's what makes it special. We share anyway. Even when we're afraid, the queen's eyes softened. Among my kind, betrayal begins at the table. Poison and lies have ended empires, yet you share food without suspicion. Ryan nodded. Because trust has to start somewhere, maybe even over dinner. The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she whispered, Then I will try. That night, as Ryan prepared to leave, she stopped him, holding out a small silver pendant shaped like a broken circle. This is a royal mark, she said. It means I have shared my table. It also means I trust you more than anyone alive. Ryan accepted it carefully, not realizing that the gift would change his fate. The next morning, the peace of the palace shattered. An explosion rocked the eastern courtyard. Alarms echoed through the halls. Ryan ran through corridors filled with smoke and confusion. The queen's guards were shouting, The food has been poisoned. He reached the banquet hall just in time to see the queen standing beside her untouched meal. Her advisors knelt in panic. A dark mist rose from the plates. The queen looked at him, calm but pale. They tried to kill me through my food, she said. Without thinking, Ryan grabbed the nearest plate and tasted it. The metallic taste burned his tongue, and his vision blurred for a second. He coughed, staggering. It's real, it's poison. The guards rushed forward. Pulling the plate away, the queen moved closer, her eyes wide with disbelief. You fool, she shouted. Why would you do that? Ryan wiped his mouth and smiled weakly. Because that's what friends do. They make sure you're safe. Something in her expression broke. The queen caught him before he fell, her glowing hands pressed against his chest. You risked your life for me, she whispered. You are not just human, you are something greater. Her healers surrounded them, pouring energy through shimmering crystals. The poison faded slowly from his veins, but the queen refused to leave his side. For the first time in her reign, she showed open emotion before her people. Later, when Ryan opened his eyes, he saw her sitting quietly beside his bed, a bowl of untouched food before her. You saved me, she said, her voice trembling. So I have made a promise. I will never eat again unless you are with me. Ryan blinked, weak but smiling. That might make diplomatic dinners difficult. She laughed softly, the sound like breaking light. Then the galaxy will adjust, she said. Outside, the royal court was in chaos. Her council demanded explanations. Some accused her of being compromised. Others whispered that she had fallen under a human spell. But the queen ignored them all. When she next appeared before her people, she wore no crown, only the same silver pendant she had given Ryan. "Our enemies tried to feed me death," she declared, "but a human fed me life." Her voice carried across the empire. "From this day, trust will not be feared, it will be shared." And somewhere deep in the crowd, Ryan stood silently, his uniform still stained, realizing that one simple act, tasting poisoned food, had turned him into something more than a soldier. He had become a symbol, a bridge between worlds that night. As the stars reflected on the silver lake, the queen looked up at the sky and whispered, "One meal, one man, one moment, and the galaxy begins to change." But she did not yet know that the true test of trust was still coming. Because in the shadows of Zirin's moons, her enemies were not done, and soon, Ryan would learn that trust could also mean war. The war of traditions. The news of the assassination attempt spread through the galaxy like a storm. Every world that once bowed to the Zirin Empire now whispered doubts. How could their proud queen depend on a human to protect her life? The word shame echoed in the halls of power, and for the first time in centuries, the Zirin Council defied their queen. Ryan Hale recovered slowly, his body still weak from the poison, but his mind sharper than ever. He watched the planet tremble under political pressure. Protests burned in the streets of silver cities. Banners floated in the air. "A human cannot rule us." Inside the palace, the queen faced her council. 12 high ministers surrounded her throne, their scaled faces cold with anger. "You have broken sacred law," one hissed. "A ruler who dines with an alien cannot lead the pureblood line of Zirin." The queen's voice was calm, but her eyes glowed like molten silver. "Purity feeds pride, pride feeds war. I will not starve my people for your pride." Another minister slammed his clawed hand on the table. "Then you will face the people's will. The army stands with us, not with your human pet." Ryan stood silently beside her, unarmed but unflinching. The queen's hand brushed against his for a second, a silent gesture of trust. She turned back to the council. "Then let the people see the truth for themselves." That night, rebels surrounded the capital. Starships blazed in the crimson skies. Every screen on Zirin broadcast their message. "The queen has fallen to human corruption. Remove her or face extinction." Ryan looked at the sky through the palace window. Thousands of ships forming a blockade. He exhaled slowly. "They'll destroy everything." The queen's voice was steady. "Then we feed them something they've never tasted. Mercy." He stared at her, confused, but she was already issuing commands. "Send a signal to Earth Command," she said. "Tell them I request food." Her advisors gasped. "Food in war?" She nodded. "Yes, I will not fight with weapons. I will fight with meals." Within hours, the human relief fleet arrived. Hundreds of cargo vessels painted white. Descending through the storm clouds, they carried no weapons. Only food supplies from every corner of Earth. Rice, fruit, bread, and water purified by human technology. Ryan led the first drop team, parachuting into war-torn Zirin cities. He handed meals to starving families. Children with glowing scales and empty eyes looked up at him, and for the first time smiled. Cameras broadcast every moment. The galaxy watched as humans, a species known for war, fed their enemies instead of fighting them. The sight shook even the hardest hearts. The queen herself walked through the streets without her crown, handing out food with her own hands, her silver skin dimmed with dust and ash. Yet she looked more powerful than ever. In one broadcast, she said, "The humans gave me bread when I was alone. Now they give it to my people when they are hungry. Remember this, kindness can win where fear cannot." Across the galaxy, other species began to question their own leaders. If the most feared queen could stand beside a human and serve the poor, what did that say about power itself? The rebel fleet hesitated. Their soldiers saw their starving families being fed, and their anger turned to silence. When their leader finally transmitted a demand, it was not for surrender, but for understanding. Ryan stood beside the queen as she spoke over the intercom. "To my enemies, I offer what the human offered me, a seat at the table." For a moment, no one answered. Then one by one, rebel ships powered down their weapons and began landing. Soldiers stepped out, confused and hungry. They were met not with bullets but with food that night. 1,000 fires burned across the plains, not from battle but from cooking. Humans and Zirins sat together, sharing bread, soup, and stories. The war ended without a single shot fired. But deep in the palace, the queen sat alone, gazing at the stars. Ryan entered quietly. "You did it," he said softly. "You stopped a war with food." She looked at him, tired but smiling. "No, Captain, we did it," she said. "You reminded me that strength is not only in claws or fleets, but in open hands." Ryan placed a small wooden box on the table before her. Inside was something simple, a loaf of bread. The queen touched it reverently. "You humans and your bread," she said with a small laugh. "You make peace taste sweet," he chuckled. "It's our secret weapon," but her eyes grew distant. "The galaxy will not understand easily. Some will call this weakness. Others will call it surrender, yet someday they will remember this moment." Ryan nodded. "And they'll remember who started it." She turned toward him, her gaze soft but heavy with meaning. "They will remember us both," she said. "For I will not dine again without the human who changed my throne into a table." Outside, the stars shimmered over a peaceful world reborn, and far beyond, other races began sending messages to Earth. "Teach us how you did it." The legend had begun to spread, not of a soldier or a queen, but of a shared meal that ended a war. Yet neither of them knew, as the night grew quiet, that peace was only the first course, and the true test, the price of trust, was still to come. The queen who waits for dinner peace had returned to Zirin Prime. The skies once filled with warships now shimmered with trade vessels and humanitarian fleets. The people who once feared humans now welcomed them with open arms. On every world that had witnessed the conflict, a quiet legend began to grow. The story of a queen and a human who shared a meal and changed the galaxy. Captain Ryan Hale was no longer just a soldier. He had become a bridge between species. Every invitation, every council meeting, now began with a single ritual, the breaking of bread. Human food had become a symbol of trust, and the queen made sure that no banquet across her empire would start without it. Yet beneath all the peace and progress, something deeper stirred each evening. When the royal court finished its duties, the queen would retreat to her private chamber. There beside her throne was a small silver table with 2 plates. One always remained untouched, waiting for him. Months passed. Ryan prepared to return to Earth. His superiors insisted he had done his duty. The diplomatic alliance was stable, humanity's reputation stronger than ever. But when he went to say goodbye, the queen stood in silence. Her silver eyes glowed softly. "You humans," she said. "You always leave too soon." Ryan smiled gently. "Maybe, but we always come back." She stepped closer, her shimmering hand resting lightly on his arm. "Will you?" she asked quietly. "Or will you vanish into your own stars like the others?" "I'll come back," he promised. "You still owe me dinner." Her lips curved in the smallest smile. "Then I will not eat until you return," he laughed, not realizing she meant it. When Ryan's ship lifted off, the queen watched from the palace balcony, the wind rippling through her silver gown. Around her, ministers and advisors waited for orders, but she said nothing. She turned back to the empty seat beside her table and whispered, "He will come back." Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Still she waited, refusing any feast, refusing any meal that did not include a human guest. Her doctors begged her to eat. Her council warned that the empire needed its queen strong. But she only smiled and said, "Strength does not come from hunger. It comes from hope." Then one day a distant tremor shook the stars. A massive humanitarian fleet appeared near Zirin space, bearing the flag of Earth at its center. A small shuttle descended toward the palace. The queen rose from her throne, her heart glowing faintly. The doors opened, and there he was, an older, scarred, but smiling the same way he had that first day. She walked toward him, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You kept your word," Ryan nodded. "You kept your hunger." The queen laughed softly, the sound like the first sunrise after war. "Then tonight," she said, "we dine." That evening, across the palace gardens, lights burned brighter than the stars. The first galactic feast of unity began. Every species, human, Zirin, and hundreds more, sat together under the open sky. The table stretched for miles, the music of many worlds blending into one rhythm. At the center sat the queen and Ryan, sharing bread and laughter as if no throne or title had ever existed. Cameras across the galaxy captured the image, the most powerful being in the known universe smiling beside a human with a meal. That picture became eternal, etched into every history file. carved into monuments, printed on banners of peace, and beneath it, the same words were written in every language. He shared his meal with the alien queen, and she never ate alone again. Years later, long after Ryan's ship had returned to the stars, the queen still kept her silver table. Every evening she would set 2 plates, one for herself and one for him. When her servants asked why, she would only reply, "Because humanity taught me that peace begins with one empty chair." And somewhere beyond the galactic rim, among the stars that had seen war and mercy alike, a human ship carried a single loaf of bread sealed in crystal, the last meal he shared with her untouched, waiting. The galaxy learned many things from humans: courage, defiance, fire. But above all, they learned that even in the cold silence of space, a single act of kindness can feed an entire universe.